Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the She Is Unleashed podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mirriam Knight, and y'all, this season of the podcast has been absolutely phenomenal. As I'm recording this, I just came back from a networking event with Amber Jordan, and y'all, it was really amazing to be able to meet some amazing, phenomenal women. And I love the conversations that God has me in this season because I'm seeing that so much of what he's teaching me through this podcast is what so many women, the feedback I'm getting on the podcast is these are the things that we women, high capacity women, are dealing with on so many different fronts. So as I'm recording this podcast episode today, I pray that something would resonate with your heart and your soul. Please share this with somebody that you feel would benefit from this. I want to hear your comments. I want to hear your feedback. I want to hear the things that God has on your heart. And y'all, if you've missed it, if you go to my Facebook profile, there's also an opportunity, if you are a listener, for you to join me on this podcast. I want to tell you a story. I want to hear how God is unleashing you in this season. So today's topic is alignment, clarity in a noisy world. How do we deal with all the noise, y'all? How do we live in this era where there is so much information coming at you from many different directions? And how do we make sure that we are not being confused, that we are not being cluttered by the noise and the chaos that is all around us? So never before have we had leaders that have more voices available to speak into their lives, more access to information, more opinions, more strategies, more examples of what others are building. This can be so helpful. There's so many resources available. And at the same time, it can also be very deeply disruptive because so many leaders are not clear, not because God has not spoken, y'all, but because they have too many competing voices in their ear that are speaking over what God has already said, what God has already assigned, how God has already instructed them to move in this season. So today we're talking about how can we be clear about our assignment in this noisy, chaotic world? Because if you don't learn how to guard your clarity, your ear gates, your eye gates, all the accessibility to your soul and your spirit and your creative zone, the noise will distort your assignment. Here's a key component. Noise does not have to be evil to be disruptive. It can be all the way a God thing. It can be God voices, spiritual voices, aligned voices. But if it's not God's heart for you, it becomes disruptive, right? Sometimes noise is good advice. It is wise counsel. It is effective strategies, strong examples, helpful opportunities. We talked about this today too. We don't have to say yes to every opportunity and every space and every invitation. We have to be able to tap into our God-given discernment to recognize what are the spaces that God needs us in, what is the information. We have to filter, not through our trauma lenses, not through our trauma ears, not through our experiences, but we have to filter through God's discernment in every situation. So even when we have good input, it can become harmful when it drowns out divine instruction, what God has told you, because some of the things God is leading us to do, especially as high capacity leaders, nobody's done it. There's no blueprint. We need to be humble enough to receive instruction and guidance and counsel, and at the same time be able to distinguish that from also the chaos and the noise that is all around us, to be able to know how does this fit into what God has specifically instructed me to do in this season. See, information is only helpful when it serves discernment, not when it replaces it. All information must serve our discernment, not replace our God-given ability to tap into what God and what heaven is instructing specifically for you. Elijah encountered in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 11 to 12, he encounters the wind, the earthquake, fire. There was all this stuff going on in the background, right? And in the midst of that, God did not show up in the earthquake, in the wind, in the fire. He showed up in a still small voice that he heard, right? We have to be able to quiet down and still ourselves enough to be able to hear the voice of God above the noise and the chaos. Here's a key truth. God will often speak very quietly, which means we need to be toned down all the way to be able to hear what he is saying. Noise must be intentionally managed in the season. Now, one of the biggest noises that we experience, which taps into that big word that we've been hearing buzzing around, imposter syndrome, is comparison. Comparison is one of the loudest forms of noise. When we constantly compare our assignment to somebody else's assignment, what we're doing, how the responses and the reactions that we're getting to what somebody else is doing, that can really cloud out our divine instruction from heaven, specifically for ourselves. One of the greatest disruptors of assignment clarity is literally that comparison. Big bold letters, comparison, because comparison will cause us to ask the question, should I be doing what they're doing? Am I behind? Am I missing something? Should I pivot? Is my lane too small? In the book, The Superwoman Detox, we talk about this reality and we say that comparison creates pressure to carry what was never assigned to. If we're constantly measuring our success, measuring our productivity, our fruitfulness by what we're seeing in other people's lives, we will constantly feel like we're playing catch up. See, here's the thing. Comparison will make you vulnerable to counterfeit assignments, premature pivots, strategic overcorrection, and identity drift. Because comparison is often the incubation space and the birthplace of misalignment if we're constantly trying to measure what we're doing by what somebody else is doing. Let's look at the lives of Peter and John. This is so cool, right? Because in John chapter 21, verses 20 to 22, Jesus is speaking to Peter and giving Peter some very clear definitions and instructions about what God is assigning to him. He's talking to him about feeding his sheep. He's talking about his journey and what's going to happen with him. And Peter turns around and asks, what about John? He's asking him, what you're going to do about him? And Jesus responds basically, mind your own business. What is that to you? You follow me. You do what I'm telling you to do. Don't worry about what I'm doing with them, with him. Do what I'm assigning you. And that can, again, become a really great distraction if we're so focused on what somebody else is doing instead of what God has specifically assigned to us. Jesus did not explain John's assignment to Peter. He doesn't owe us an explanation of what somebody else is doing. I see it a lot on social media, and I'm probably going to get into trouble about this, but it's okay. I see so many people who build their empires and build their businesses and their ministries upon criticizing what somebody else is doing. And y'all, when you get to heaven, God's not going to ask you about what somebody else did. He's going to ask you about what you did. Did you do what I assigned you to do? Not what somebody else is doing. You're not going to give an account to him for somebody else's assignment. We're so busy criticizing and tearing one another down that we fail to do what God has assigned us to do. So Jesus, again, he does not explain John's assignment to Peter, but he redirects Peter back to his own assignment. A lot of things we need to let go of is this need to compare what we're doing to what somebody else is doing. It's not going to look the same. Mature leaders stop obsessing over what God is doing with other people and instead return their focus to what he said to them. I steer away from anyone that spends so much time talking about what somebody else is doing because I'm not about that. That is not my assignment, to spend time talking about what somebody else is doing. I got a job to do. I got an assignment for my own life that I need to be focused on. I hope you do too. When we look at the mantle map, which is one of our key tools in the She's Unleashed community and the collective, as well as in the whole leader community, we talk about understanding what your assignment is, how God built you and what he built you to do because of how he designed and built you. We need to understand that not everyone is called to build the same way, lead the same way, carry the same burden, operate in the same rhythm, and express the same influence. Assignment clarity requires you understanding what is your specific burden, what is your lane, what is your specific audience, your authority, your season, and your capacity. Because the truth is, your assignment does not need to, nor is it validated by how similar it is to someone else's. No matter how similar it might seem, there is a specific person that God has assigned specifically to you that needs your specific makeup and design. Even though it sounds and looks the same, it is not the same. Who you are called to is not the same. So we're not in a competition. Even if you're doing something that looks like what I'm doing, our assignment, our audience, the people God has called us to, not the same. beyond that, who you are and the authority that you carry, the story that you carry, is also very different from mine. So keep doing what God has called you to do. We may all have something that seems similar, but it's definitely not the same because of who God designed you uniquely to be and what He's placed specifically upon your life. When we look at all of this through the lens of the whole leader, we teach that the less internally settled you are, the more externally influenced you become. If you don't know who you are, if you don't know what your assignment is, if you haven't heard directly from the Father, from your Creator, who you are and why you were designed the way you are, sorry, you will become unstable. And in that instability, you will become overly responsive to the trends. You don't have to do everything that is trending. You don't have to do everything that everyone says. This is how you fit the algorithm. This is what you need to do to grow your business. We don't have to follow what the world is following. What we do have to do is follow God's divine blueprint for your life. Ask Him. God is intricately interested in being involved in every specific detail of your life, your business, and your ministry. Because again, it's not yours. He's assigned it to you. He's entrusted it to you, but it is His, given to you for stewardship. You then also begin to overvalue other people's opinions. When people are saying, oh, don't do this. Listen, if Noah had depended on what people were saying, he would not have built that ark, and the world would have been demolished, and all the animals and everything that he was called to preserve would have been lost because of his disobedience based on people's opinions. Because in that moment, nobody had a positive thing to say about what he was doing because it had never been done and it looked absolutely crazy. When your identity is unstable, excuse me, you will second guess your path and you will pivot too frequently because you're trying this and you're trying that and you're trying this and you're trying that, and you're not willing to stay with God as assigned to you until the end. We've got to be people that follow through and see things through to the end, not our end, but His end. When He says let go, we let go. When He says it's time to pivot, this is the key component of high capacity faith driven leaders, is that we don't just make moves. We move with the cloud. We move with the glory. We move with God when God says move, and we hold our position and we hold our ground, even in the midst of storms and uncertainty, even when it makes no sense, because He said so, because He hasn't moved, right? A lot of unhealed insecurity makes leaders hyper aware of competitors. I said this today at the table. I said, I don't want to be at tables where we're talking about haters. I don't want to be at tables where we're having negative conversations about all the people and all the issues. I don't want to gossip. I don't want to be at tables where it's gossip. But what I do want to do is I want to be an intentional, purposeful, mission driven tables where we're moving forward and we're encouraging and building one another up and focusing on the mission at hand. Unhealed insecurity causes leaders to be vulnerable to strategic envy, constantly envious and jealous of what other people are doing. Y'all, it's because you're not healed. There's something that is misaligned internally. Chronically uncertain, you're not making steady, confident, bold moves and being easily distracted. When we look at our HEAL framework, we talk about how alignment requires signal filtering. We have to be able to filter through and recognize, what signal am I getting? This panic, this anxiety, this fear, this drive, this urgency, where is it coming from? We have to be ruthless in our times of expansion and alignment to really filter through all the signals that we're getting. Not everything that we call discernment is actually discernment. A lot of times it is fear. A lot of times it's insecurity. A lot of times it is literally not God. It is you and all your past experiences that are showing up like discernment. The deception of the enemy is to cause you to move in that space when it's really not God that's causing you to move in that space. We have to be able to be ruthless in filtering the signals that we are getting in this season. Not every voice in your life deserves weight. You got to ask yourself these 4 questions. Does this person understand my assignment? Do they have the authority to speak into this area of my life? What are the receipts, right? We talked about that today at this table too. Are they aligned with your values and your season? Again, if they're not believers, if they're not aligned with heaven, I don't need you speaking into my life. You may have something to contribute, but your word is not authority in my life, right? You don't get the final say if you are not aligned with heaven. And finally, does this input confirm clarity or create confusion? We also have to look at the fruit of our interactions with these people. Is it bringing clarity or is it bringing further confusion? Again, not every voice deserves equal influence. When you evaluate advice, trends, or opportunities, let's go back. We've been talking about the discernment grid. We've got to protect our clarity. Again, does this align with what God has already said to you? Because God will not give you instruction through somebody else's voice that he hasn't directly spoken to you. Number two, again, that is if you're submitted and yielded and willing to sit at his feet and learn from him, right? Number two, is this insight clarifying my assignment or is it complicating it? Number three, am I considering this from discernment or insecurity? Is it coming from fear or love? Is it driven by fear or love? Does this create peace or pressure? Y'all, God's peace, this is the crazy part, is peace in the midst of a storm. Peace is not discerned by what is going on externally. It doesn't mean that all the ducks are going to fall into rows, but it does mean that internally you sense and you know within your spirit that God has divinely positioned you for this. This is right in your spirit. It aligns with the resonating yes that you're getting from heaven. Here's some practical ways that you can reduce the noise. If you need a clarity in your assignment, one, reduce your inputs. I would say, first of all, go to God, spend time with God, shut off the phone, shut off social media, shut off YouTube, shut off all the extra additional. Stop trying to book lunches and dinners and everything with everybody, meetings, trying to get everyone to give you input. Sit down with the Lord and allow the Lord to be the first voice that you hear coming through. Audit what is shaping your mind. Number two, limit comparison exposure. Not every successful person needs your attention. You might have to unfollow some people because their influence, not because they even know you or they have a relationship with you, but their voice in your life, their exposure to you is literally creating this catch up, this FOMO kind of feeling of you're missing out on something, that you're misaligned or whatever that is. So unfollow those people. Yes, I'm saying unfollow. If their presence in your life is creating chaos instead of clarity, maybe it's time to let those go, even if it's for a season. Number three, revisit your prior instruction. God is not a God that he changes his mind. He is a God of his word. So if you haven't done the last thing that he told you to do, go back to that instruction. He's not going to give you something different from what he told you last time. You got to first go finish the first instruction. Go do what God told you to do. Sometimes God's not speaking right now because you haven't obeyed the last thing he told you to do. So go back to the instructions that God gave you. Go back to the blueprint that he gave you. He did not change his mind. This year, my theme is build what God has already assigned you. We are so busy looking for the next shiny object, the next instruction, when God is like, I already told you what I needed you to do. I already gave you the blueprint. I remember asking ChatGPT a while ago for its feedback on me to be my coach in a way and tell me what's up with me. And he said, you got a plan for a plan for a plan, and you need to now execute. We're doing too much planning. We're doing too much information gathering. We're doing too much data collection, and we're hearing too many things. We need to actually execute and walk on and have confidence in the things that God has already given to us. And finally, create space for silence. Clarity requires us to have margin, and that margin comes from us actually creating blank space, empty space. We've got to create some silence. Noise thrives where silence is neglected. A lot of us are uncomfortable with silence because we're afraid of what will come up in those places of silence. We're afraid of confronting ourselves in those places of silence. We got to say no to the invitation. We've got to say no to the distraction. We have to create space for silence and stillness in our lives. A lot of the most successful people in life are people that have been intentional about creating room for silence and stillness as part of their daily practice. Look at all the books from some of the greats, and you will see that stillness and silence was a practice. They had to find room to be still and be quiet so that they could find clarity. Here's one I want to say in conclusion today. You have to always go back to what God said. If you've been feeling confused lately, if clarity has weakened, if your vision feels crowded, I need you to ask this question. Have I lost the voice of God, or have I simply allowed too much noise? A lot of times when we say, I'm not hearing God, it's not because God isn't speaking. It's because there's too much noise and chaos in your life that it clouds out the voice of God. So we have to cultivate stillness and quiet in our lives. Get away with the Lord intentionally so that you can find that clarity that you're seeking for. If there is anything in this episode that has resonated with you, that spoke to your soul, please drop me a note, a comment in the chat. Let me know what resonated with you. And here's what I would love to invite you to be a part of. If you want to work with me, if you want to connect with me, join the She's Unleashed Collective. It is a space, it is a safe space for high capacity women where we literally create room for you to develop your discernment, develop your strategic leadership, and to find alignment support to do the things that God has assigned you to do in this season. Secondly, I want to invite you into the Whole Leader Intensive, where we do deeper work around identity, insecurity, and internal steadiness in leadership. And we are going into quarter two starting in July. This year, I've been doing quarterly 42-day build resets that help you build the rhythms of discipline, silence, and spiritual alignment. And finally, look out for any breathe experiences where we create some space for you to literally sit in stillness and quiet to hear God clearly. If you go to our website at www.destiny-connections.com, you will find some resources for you, some free tools, some transformational resources, some books, as well as the ability to pre-order the Whole Leader book and workbook, which will be released in the next couple of months. Listen, sis, the loudest voice in your life should not be culture, comparison, or pressure. It should be the voice of God, because clarity is not found by listening to everyone. It is found by remaining anchored in what God has said to you. God bless you, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care.